I'm a huge fan of what you've been doing, not only in terms of the innovation, but you've seemed to have managed to blend value and quality for what seems like the first time ever.
Nice to you to notice.
Thank you. Yeah. So to tell us, is that the heart of what you're doing with Fred King and vintage?
Yeah. I mean, I think you've hit the nail on the head. I mean, the reality of it is to build quality in and to build features in actually doesn't cost that much more. You've just got a desire to want to do it. And you know, with some companies, they'll look at a product and they'll say, right, that's the price point there, that's got those features. If we make those features available at the lower price point, maybe they won't buy the more expensive guitar. So there's an agenda there, which sometimes may not be as, you know, what can we say, as honest as it could be. And so with Fred King, we've always set out to, the Fred King philosophy has always been to give more bang for the buck, to make guitars for serious guitar players in a serious fashion. And the reality of it is if you use the right materials and you train your factories no matter where they are, then what's the difference between a nice piece of older being CNC'd or pin routed in Korea, Japan, China or America? And the reality of it is there's no difference. It's just training your people how to make it right and keeping a check on that. So you can actually make a very, very good guitar at a lower price point, which is comparable to things costing 3 or 4 times as much. I always say, if you can't build a good guitar for $3,000, then you shouldn't be doing it. The skill is to build a guitar for $300 that plays like a $3,000 guitar. And that's what we're trying to achieve, you know?
It seems like there's like a discrepancy. You're playing rock and roll music, but yet, you know, some people want you to spend $5 grand on a guitar, you know, which is, it's rock and roll. I mean, you know, it seems like an odd, you know, request sometimes. So I guess what you're saying is there's a vision that you're applying to the manufacturing process, and that's what's really going to differentiate, you know.
And we know when players pick them up and play them, they really recognise the fact that, yeah, this is a serious guitar, no matter what the price point is. You know, I like to think that any of our guitars could go in front of 3,000 or 5,000 people with a pro player. That, you know, it's a really affordable guitar for your start-out guitar player.
It seems like prior to the Fred King coming on the scene, you would buy a Mexican Strat, or you'd buy a Squire, then you'd have to replace all the parts, you know, and go and do all that. And it seems like what you've done is do that for the player already. You know what I mean? So you don't have to go through that headache of you know, swapping out all your parts to make your guitar up to speed.
Yeah, well, of course, you know, I cut my teeth on making parts anyway. That's really where, you know, the name Wilkinson came from.
Yep.
And again, it was only taking proven concepts and just making small improvements to make them work. And then when we did the line of products that we do in Korea with my manufacturing partners there, I think that was the first time somebody had sort of like looked at a real bridge with the real dimensions to fit a real guitar and have it made to the specs it should be. And then that way, at source, you've got access to that bridge at a much lower cost, but it's still exactly the same quality. And then when you're building the features like staggered drill blocks, hardened steel knife edges and all those kind of things at those price points, you've actually got a bridge that works that you don't need to replace.
It seems like there seems to be a discrepancy between, you know, what's made in China, for example, or a perceived, you know, quality or a loss of quality, if you will, if it's made in China versus made in Japan versus made in Korea. Is that a byproduct of just the time spent or the experience making guitars, or does that have to do with the actual people who are having the guitars manufactured? In other words, is it a vision issue or is it a location issue?
I think it's a little bit of both, and if I can try and qualify that. Japan, obviously, by its very nature, is an expensive place to manufacture. But Japan, because it's been on the learning curve since the late 50s, it really is good at what it does. But there is a price to pay for that. You come down to Korea. Korea learnt its craft from Japan and learnt it in a quick time frame. In fact, Korea only had a short time frame before China came on board. Most of the Chinese companies are kind of Korean-led in many ways, because it was the Korean industry saying, let's go to China because we get less expensive labour in China. When you do get to China, what you're actually entering into is a world of very willing people who now are not quite paid in a bowl of rice a week. You know, they're getting good living wages, so the prices of Chinese stuff is going up all the time. The quality, if you manage it, can be very, very good. What you don't have is you don't have any guitar players truly in the factory. I've been in factories with sort of like 600 workers and not one of them play a guitar. Now they can go through all the processes But you know, you can pick up a guitar, I can pick up a guitar, and I can go, oh, that neck feels good. And a lot of the workers in those factories don't know how to do that. To them, it's a piece of wood, it's beautifully smooth, it's been beautifully sanded, but it's either like a baseball bat or it's sort of like too thin to play. They actually don't know that in their actual culture.
Right, right.
I'm not knocking their culture, because their culture it does other things so well that we can't even do. But it's very difficult. It's strange of us to accept to think that they would know exactly what we want from a guitar unless we tell them.
Now it's kind of ironic, because Leo Fender couldn't really play either, you know. But
Leo was definitely not a guitar player. In fact, his instrument of choice, if he could have done, was a saxophone.
Yeah, there you go. But somehow he was able to objectively look at a guitar and say yay or nay in terms of quality, playability, you know what I mean, just by on the data.
He certainly used players, he certainly listened to guitar players. I mean, you got to remember that when he was doing it was the dawn of it.
Right.
So he was the innovator in many respects, along with Gibson and a few other people like Rickenbacker and what have you. So he was innovating, and he was learning, and you know, his neck profiles changed dramatically over the first few years. You know, the first sort of like broadcaster didn't even have a truss rod in it. So he was using the full inch of the maple with a big chunky neck, and then he went to a V-neck to try and slim the shoulders down, and then eventually, because of all the weather that was sort of like prevalent across America, necks were moving and he had to give in and go to a truss rod. It was necessary. And then when the truss rod was there, of course, you could start slimming the necks down or changing the profiles, and then he would listen to players how to do that. You know, but it's very interesting that, you know, in the early days you've got Fender A, B, C, D and E necks, and everybody's going, oh, isn't that great at Fender? They're actually allowing us to have different shaped necks. That wasn't the case at all. You just can't sand the neck the same every time. That's the way you sell all the necks you make.
Yeah, very good. Do you think it's a fair analogy to compare, to look at the car industry, for example, and how it's grown in Asia in terms of quality perception and guitars? You know what I mean? It seems like the trajectory seems similar to me.
Yeah, in many ways it is, but I think with the cars, there's an awful lot of automation. See, people talk about CNC machinery with guitars. Great, CNC machinery, fantastic. But there's only a certain amount you can do with it. I still believe that 80 to 85% of the guitar is still handmade. Even if you've used a CNC machine to cut the profile, to route the body, you can't get a CNC machine truly to paint correctly. You can't get a CNC machine really to do a sunburst. You can't really get a CNC machine to sand the neck or fret one.
Right.
You can automate some things, but most factories don't have that desire or that knowledge to make all these machines. So there's still an awful lot of hand building that goes into a guitar, whereas with a car, it's all jigs and fixtures down the line.
I see.
So you can really build consistent quality into a car a lot easier than you can into a guitar.
I see. So you wouldn't necessarily say that Fred King or vintage is the sum of the parts only. There's obviously a human on the other end of it, making sure the feel is correct, making sure all that organic stuff comes together. Is that the case?
You've got it.
Yeah.
You've
Okay.
And it's a matter about training your people.
So
this is the way you install frets. This is what you do to the fret ends. This is what you do to a fret job. This is why we do this radius. This is why this is this shape. We want to see that all the time. We want a neck that slides into a neck pocket. It doesn't rattle around in there. All those little things, which to them are details that truly don't matter because they don't understand it. So you have to put that criteria in place. And that's how you try and keep on top of your quality.
So would you say that the innovation in what you're doing is also in the process, not just in the parts, correct? That's interesting. Now, is there a guitar that's close to your heart that's in this line that sort of exemplifies the process, everything? You know, is there one particular model that you want to show us that?
I don't think there's one. I don't think there's one particular model. I think if we look at the Jerry Donahue model, for instance. Which is one of the first black labels that we've done, and that guitar's got a map of 749.
Right.
Now, the work that went into developing that guitar to please Jerry, who of course has already been with a Fender guitar and also with a PV guitar, so he knows what he wants. He's a great player. He's got great ears. We had to build a guitar. Not just to say, oh, let's put your name on it. We had to build a guitar that Jerry could go out and play.
Right.
So that was quite a